Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. You are welcome to Lecture 2 of the Research Methods Across Disciplines lecture series. I'm Linus Oswagu, PhD valedictorian, full professor of marketing at Veritas University Abuja in Nigeria, former chair of Institutional Review Board IRB at the American University of Nigeria, AUN in Yola, and former vice chancellor of a university in Nigeria. I bring to this lecture series over 3 decades of experience in teaching, research, and university leadership. In Lecture 1, if you recall, we laid the foundation by defining research and exploring its characteristics, types, and the research process, among other cognate issues. Today, in Lecture 2, we go deeper into the philosophy of research. We will explore the interconnected branches of research philosophy, major research paradigms, and the coherent alignment among research philosophy, paradigms, methodology, and methods. Also, we will discuss the colonial legacies in research methodology and how the colonial approaches offer alternatives, especially for Global South researchers. By the end of this lecture 2, you will position your thesis or dissertation within a research paradigm in addition to philosophical guidance for executive decisions. The next 2 slides provide relevant social media links for the lecture series and information about the series lecturer, Professor Linus Oswagu. So let us continue our journey. Stay curious, stay methodologically elastic, and stay contextually relevant. Let's begin. Enjoy. This slide provides information about the entire lecture series. It is a comprehensive lecture series for postgraduate students and organizational executives. The information here contains LinkedIn profile, Google Scholar profile, and YouTube channel for the lecture series. This slide provides information about the series lecturer, his academic background, research interests, social media links, and his contact currently. Once again, I welcome you to Lecture 2. By the end of this lecture, learners will be able to explain the 3 interconnected branches of research philosophy, distinguish between major ontological positions, distinguish between major epistemological positions, compare and contrast the 4 major research paradigms, map the coherent alignment among research philosophy, paradigm, methodology, and methods. Identify the implications of colonial legacies in research methodology in the Global South and understand the colonial research approaches from the Global South. Apply the Ubuntu philosophy as a foundation for research in Global South context. Evaluate research paradigm, research methodology alignment, and avoid the incoherent research design choices. Position their own thesis dissertation explicitly within research paradigm. Draft 1-paragraph philosophical position statement for their thesis or dissertation. We've also provided some sources for further reading in this slide. And there we see key literature for lecture 2. We have provided some essential readings to support the lecture. This slide shows branches of research philosophy. Today we tackle what many researchers find intimidating, that is, the philosophy of science that underpins all inquiry or research. But here is the point. Your philosophical assumptions in research are the lens through which you see the world. You cannot do research without them. Therefore, the task is to understand and choose the lens deliberately and appropriately. Research philosophy generally has three interconnected branches. That is, ontology, epistemology, and axiology that shape every research decision. In the global south, this choice is also political because these mainstream research paradigms were codified largely in the global north. As a result, some scholars argue for epistemologies of the global south that will include indigenous knowledge systems. The major branches of philosophy for the purpose of research include 1. Ontology, which focuses on the nature of reality. Ontology asks the question, what is the nature of reality? What exists and what is real? A realist regarding ontology holds that a single objective reality exists, independent of the observer or researcher. This means that reality is out there, whether or not we perceive it. A relativist in ontology, on the other hand, holds that there are multiple realities which are shaped by our experiences, languages, and social contexts. This is a global south example. Is poverty a single measurable fact, income below a line, or a lived multidimensional reality? Poverty has been reframed as deprivation and real freedoms and is now captured in the multidimensional poverty index used by some countries, including India and other countries in the global south. Branch 2 of philosophy is epistemology, which focuses on the nature of knowledge. Epistemology asks, how can we know that reality exists? How is legitimate knowledge acquired and justified or explained? And objectivists in epistemology hold that knowledge exists independently of the knower or researcher and can be discovered through detached objective methods. A subjectivist in epistemology, on the other hand, holds that knowledge is co-created via interactions between the researcher and the researched. This is a global south example. Smallholder farmers' indigenous knowledge of rains, soils, and seed is co-created and context-bound, treating it as legitimate knowledge alongside scientific data. That is, relative epistemology or knowledge has strengthened climate adaptation research across Africa. Branch 3 of philosophy, that is axiology, focuses on value. Axiology asks the question, what is the role of values in research? Should researchers be value-free, or is value-laden research legitimate? Positivists in axiology argue that the researcher should remain neutral and detached with regard to value, thereby keeping personal values out of the inquiry or research. Interpretivists in axiology and transformative scholars consider countered that values are inevitable and should be acknowledged openly, especially where research addresses justice issues. Global South example. First Borders Participatory Action Research (PAR), with Colombian peasants and current debates over whose epistemology counts in African health research, represent committed inquiry or research for justice. Here is the connection or link. Philosophy is connected to paradigm, and paradigm is connected to methodology. Methodology is connected to methods. This is referred to as the research onion. Research philosophy addresses the question, what is your view of reality, knowledge, and value in research? Research paradigm addresses the question, what is your overall framework in research? Research methodology addresses the question, what is your research strategy or approach? And research methods address the question, what specific tools will you use in your research? For example, to explain why M-Pesa mobile money transformed livelihoods in Kenya, note the interconnections, alignments of philosophy, paradigm, methodology, and methods. An interpretive philosophy, constructive paradigm, ethnographic methodology, and interviews or observation as methods. Some key takeaway at this stage of lecture 2. Your research philosophy shapes everything. The research questions you ask, the research methods you use, and how you interpret your research findings. For the Global South researchers, you are advised to choose your research lens deliberately and critically. Much of the default or so-called research methodology was built everywhere or elsewhere. Therefore, you are advised to interrogate whose research assumptions you are adopting in your research. A self-assessment check at this stage. Do you know your own philosophical assumptions in research? If not, do not be bothered at this stage. We will explore them in depth in this lecture. Let me dive deeper into ontology, the nature of reality. And I will start with realism as an ontological position. Realism posits a single objective reality existing independent of human perception. That is, a world out there waiting to be discovered or investigated. In management research, for instance, realism might treat concepts like employee satisfaction or organizational culture as real, measurable phenomena. Relativism as an ontological position. Relativism posits that reality is socially constructed, so different people experience different, equally valid realities. In management science research, for instance, relativism might hold that employee satisfaction means different things to different people or researchers in different research contexts. There is the Buddhist philosophy, which is I am because we are, and because we are, I am. And this expresses a relational ontology of interconnectedness, community, and mutual responsibility. This contrasts with global North individualism and has profound implications for how research is designed and conducted, especially in the global south. In Ubuntu ontology, the person is not separate from the community being researched. Therefore, research in such context must account and accommodate for relationships between and among persons, not just the isolated individual. Some key takeaways at this time. Your ontological position determines what you consider real and what studying or researching. Self-assessment check at this stage. Are you a realist? Are you a realist or a relativist or somewhere in between? You ponder over this. Let's look at epistemological positions in research. And that is how we know what we know. And it comprises objectivism. Objectivism in epistemology holds that knowledge exists independent of the knower or researcher and can be discovered through rigorous, value-free methods. Objectivism underpins the knowledge approach associated with the natural sciences such as physics. For instance, the weight of an object is the same regardless of who measures it. In social science, objectivism treats social phenomena like physical ones, that is, measurable, predictable, and law-like governed. Some scholars, however, have questioned this knowledge approach. Subjectivism in epistemology holds that knowledge is created through interaction between the knower or researcher and the known or researched. This means that you cannot separate the knower or researcher from the known or researched. Subjectivism in epistemology is associated with many qualitative research traditions. Therefore, understanding a phenomenon in this stream means understanding how people experience it. The third one is critical realism in epistemology. Critical realism in epistemology bridges objectivism and subjectivism. This means that a real world exists, but we perceive only part of this real world. In social science, for instance, critical realism recognizes that issues such as class, gender, and institutions are real, even when not directly observable. We are making some distinctions among objectivism, subjectivism, and critical realism. As you see in this slide, there are 4 columns comprising aspects: objectivism, subjectivism, and critical realism. With regard to reality, objectivism holds that there is a single reality which is objective, while subjectivity holds that reality is multiple and subjective. Critical realism holds that reality is single but partially knowable. With regard to knowledge, objectivism holds that the knowledge is discovered, while subjectivity holds that knowledge is constructed, and critical realism holds that knowledge is both discovered and constructed. Regarding researchers' value, objectivism holds that researcher is value-free. There is no bias researcher's value. Subjectivity holds that researcher's value is value-laden, while critical realism with regard to values holds that the researcher is value-aware. Regarding research methods used, objectivism uses mainly quantitative research methods. Subjectivism uses mainly qualitative research methods, while critical realism uses mixed methods. At this stage, let's look at some takeaway. Your epistemological position in research determines what you consider valid knowledge and how you acquire the knowledge via research. Some self-assessment check at this stage again. If you study employee motivation, for example, do you believe you can measure it objectively, or do you need to understand its meanings subjectively? Let's compare research paradigms. A research paradigm is a basic belief system or worldview that integrates ontology, epistemology, axiology, and methodology. The four research paradigms most used in social and management science research works are positivism, interpretivism, pragmatism, and transformative paradigm. We explain positivism. Positivism is the physics model. It holds that reality exists objectively, knowledge derived from observable facts, and researchers use or seek universal laws. Positivism is associated with the following. Its ontology is realistic. It's realist ontology. It has a realist ontology. Its epistemology is objectivist. Its methodology is quantitative, perhaps via experiments, surveys, among others. Its methods are structured. It utilizes hypothesis testing and statistical analysis. This is a global South example. A survey of 500 small and medium enterprises across Nigeria, measuring the relationship between leadership style and productivity. This assumes that both leadership style and productivity can be measured objectively. Interpretivism is the literary criticism model. It holds that reality is socially constructed and researchers seek to understand meaning. Its ontology is relativist, meaning that there are multiple truths. Its epistemology is subjectivist, meaning that knowledge is constructed. Its methodology is qualitative, which is via individual depth interviews, observations, etc. Its methods are open-ended questions, thematic analysis, interpretation, and others. Global South example. In-depth interviews with women entrepreneurs in Lagos, Nigeria examines what success means to them beyond profits. The third one is pragmatism. Pragmatism is the whatever works model. This means that truth is what solves problems, and methods are simply tools. Its ontology is mixed, meaning that reality is both objective and subjective. Its epistemology is mixed, meaning that knowledge is both discovered and constructed. Its methodology is also mixed. Its methods is whatever works. That can be surveys, individual depth interviews, experiments, etc. Global South example. Using surveys to measure M-Pesa mobile money adoption across Kenya, breadth, and individual depth interviews to understand why it varies, that is depth. The fourth one is transformative paradigm. Transformative paradigm is the empowerment model. This means that research should be used to confront power imbalances and advance social justice. This ontology is relativist, realist, which is informed by historical inequalities, for instance. This epistemology is subjectivist. The knowledge is shaped by power relations. This methodology is participatory. It uses community-engaged research. This method includes action research, participatory and community-based methods. Global South example. A community-based research or study of access to clean water, co-designed and co-constructed with residents as co-researchers, will come under transformative paradigm. So the connection, philosophy why, paradigm what, methodology how, and methods to use should not be a bit clear. For example, philosophy is positivism, paradigm is positivist, methodology is quantitative survey research, and method structured questionnaire, statistical analysis, and hypothesis testing. Some takeaway at this stage. Your research paradigm is your worldview. It shapes everything about your research, from the questions you ask to how you interpret your research findings. A self-assessment check. Which paradigm resonates with you in your research, in your discipline, and why? Some research paradigm in action with regard to the Global South. The M-PISA, Kenya, Pragmatism is used here. Surveys tracked how fast mobile money spread, while interviews, that is individual depth interviews, explain why it took hold, perhaps because of trust, kinship networks, and the underbanked. Again, there's participatory action research, PAR, in Colombia, which is transformative paradigm. Orlando Force Border worked with peasant communities as co-researchers, making inquiry a tool for social movements, not data extraction. Women agripreneurs in Southern Africa. This is interpretivism. These studies of rural women's financial inclusion show that lived experiences and structural barriers, not just numbers or statistics alone. Indigenous knowledge systems. Experiences and examples from Ubuntu in Southern Africa to the Andes Mountain in South America show that Global South epistemologies are also theory, because they involve description and explanation of lived experiences, not merely data. Therefore, the key to credible research is alignment. This means that your research paradigm must align with your research methodology. Here is what coherent and incoherent alignment look like. Coherent research alignment. Positivism aligns with quantitative methodology of surveys, experiments, and statistical analysis, because positivism assumes objective measurement. Interpretivism aligns with qualitative research methodology, including in-depth interviews, observations, thematic analysis, etc., because interpretivism assumes subjective meaning. Pragmatism aligns with mixed methods research methodology, comprising surveys plus in-depth interviews and others, because pragmatism draws on multiple research approaches. Here is Coherent Research Alignment. Positivism research paradigm with qualitative interviews research methodology. This is incoherent because it contradicts the subjective interpretive nature of qualitative data. Therefore, there is no alignment between research paradigm and research methodology. Interpretivism research paradigm with experimental research. With regard to methodology, experimentation misaligns with the need for subjective meaning, which is interpretivism. It should be noted by researchers that incoherent research alignment is problematic. Let me give you an example of how to assess alignment in research. Take this statement. Using an interpretivist research paradigm, I will conduct a survey of 1,000 employees to measure job satisfaction. We are assessing this statement regarding alignment. This is an incoherent alignment because interpretivism research paradigm aligns with qualitative research methodology, not the methodology of quantitative surveys. This is a better approach. Using a positivist paradigm, I will conduct a survey of 1,000 employees to measure job satisfaction. This is a coherent alignment because positivism research paradigm aligns with quantitative research methodology, which aligns with survey research method. Some takeaway at this stage. If your research paradigm and methodology don't align, your research is philosophically problematic. Therefore, coherent alignment is the hallmark of credible research. Let's take a self-assessment check at this stage. Do your research philosophy and methods align? If not, change. Let me discuss research paradigms and the global south. We'll address the intersections of research paradigm and the global south. Let's look at the colonial legacies in research methodology. The global north positivism has historically marginalized indigenous knowledge systems in the global south. The examples will show that research method textbooks and training are largely produced in the global north. And global south epistemologies, meaning knowledge systems, are often treated as data rather than theory. The consequence of this is a form of what scholars have called methodological whiteness. That is, the assumption that global north research methods are universal and superior. There are decolonial research approaches as a consequence. Decolonial research approaches in the global south seek to redress colonial legacies in research methodology via or by emphasizing indigenous ontologies and epistemologies, that is, treating global south knowledge systems as valid theory, not merely data. Challenging universalist claims by recognizing that what works in the global north may not transfer to the global south research context. By prioritizing community benefit, meaning that research should serve communities, not to extract from them. And by using culturally appropriate research methods, and that will include adapting research methods to the cultural context of the global south. Let's look at Ubuntu as philosophical research foundation. Ubuntu, meaning I am because we are, offers a genuinely different foundation for research practices and ethics than the global north individualism approach. It emphasizes interconnectedness, community, relationship, and mutual responsibility, thereby grounding research ethics in reciprocity and accountability. A Global South example. A study of community health practices in rural Nigeria might adopt transformative research paradigm, recognizing the dynamics that can be shaped and emphasizing whose knowledge should be counted. This slide compares colonial versus decolonial research approaches. And there are 3 columns shown on this slide with regard to aspects, colonial research and decolonial research. With regard to purpose, colonial research emphasizes knowledge extraction, while decolonial research emphasizes community benefits. With regard to relationship, colonial research focuses on researchers' subject. In short, it sees the research respondent as a subject. With regard to decolonial research, research subjects are treated as co-researchers. With regard to methods, colonial research methods are imposed from outside. With regard to methods, decolonial research methods are adapted to the research context. Regarding knowledge, colonial research is dominated by northern theories, and decolonial research regarding knowledge values indigenous knowledge. Regarding ethics, colonial research focuses on individual consent, while decolonial research regarding ethics focuses on community consent as well as individual consent. For researchers, we advise that you should critically examine your research methodologies. Do not assume global north research methods are universally applicable and useful always. Also engage with global south epistemologies, meaning learn from and with global south knowledge systems. We advise that you practice genuine reflexivity, meaning examine how your research might inadvertently reinforce coloniality in the global south research context. We also advise that you build equitable partnerships with research communities, meaning co-create research with stakeholders rather than imposing research on them. For higher education institutions, we advise that you diversify research methods curricula to include global south epistemologies. We also advise that you support South-South research collaborations and partnerships. We advise that you recognize and reward knowledge produced outside the global north frameworks. For all, we want you to be sensitive to the fact that the pretense of decolonized research operates through several mechanisms. Universalizing the global north methodologies, performing decolonial research that fails to transform global south communities, and extracting data without genuine partnership. Beyond this pretense, research requires rethinking what counts and what is valued as legitimate knowledge and how it should be investigated, produced, and shared. Key takeaway here. Decolonizing research methodology is not about rejecting global north research methods. Far from that. It is about recognizing that some global north research methods are narrow traditions, not universal standards. It is also about treating global south knowledge systems as theory, not merely data locations. Self-assessment at this stage. How does your research in your discipline enable the study of the realities of the global south? We're presenting an executive decision framework regarding choosing the right research paradigm. For our executive audience, let me provide a practical framework for choosing the right research paradigm for organizational questions or issues. As you see on this slide, there are 3 columns comprising research paradigm, when to use, and some examples. With regard to the research paradigm of positivism, you use it when you need numbers, benchmarks, or predictions. Example, measuring employee engagement in your organization. With regard to the research paradigm of interpretivism, you use when you need to understand meanings, culture, and experience. For example, understanding why employees resist organizational change. With regard to the research paradigm of pragmatism, you use it when you need both breadth and depth. For example, understanding what customers want and why they want those things. And with regard to transformative research paradigm, you use when you are addressing power, equity, and social justice. Example is co-designing research solutions with marginalized groups in the research context of interest. We want to give an executive example of research paradigm from experience. A grand learner wanted quantitative data, meaning hard numbers, on the employee morale in an NGO operating across West Africa. This is a positivist request, but morale is subjective and context dependent. The research team used a pragmatic mixed methods research design comprising surveys for breadth, which is positivist, and focus group discussions for depth, that is interpretivist. In this research, the donor, the grant donor, got numbers and also understood why the numbers were what they were. This executive takeaway regarding research paradigms. Do not assume that one research paradigm fits all research questions or issues. Also match your research approach to your research decision need. In addition, if you need numbers, go positivist. If you need meaning, go interpretivist. If you need both, go pragmatist. Let's give a executive self-assessment check here. Think of a recent organizational decision you have been confronted with. What research paradigm would have been most appropriate? We present thesis dissertation connection in this lecture 2. For our postgraduate students, let me show you how to position your research paradigm in your thesis or dissertation. Examples of research statements. For positivists, this study adopts a positivist research paradigm grounded in the belief that an objective reality exists and can be measured through standardized research instruments. Hypotheses will be formulated and tested using statistical methods. Interpretivist. This study adopts an interpretivist research paradigm, recognizing that reality is socially constructed. Therefore, semi-structured interviews will explore participants' lived experiences and subjective meanings. Pragmatist. This study adopts a pragmatist research paradigm using mixed methods. Quantitative surveys will provide breadth, while qualitative in-depth interviews will provide depth. Transformative. This study adopts a transformative research paradigm, emphasizing community voices, addressing power imbalances, among others. Participatory action research, co-designed with communities, will be used. Key takeaway. For postgraduate students, you are advised to position your thesis or dissertation explicitly within a research paradigm. This anchors your entire research methodology for your research. Let's give a self-assessment check here. Can you write a one-paragraph research paradigm positioning statement for your thesis or dissertation in your discipline at this stage? We are presenting some questions for the issues discussed in Lecture 2. Question 1. Which branch of research philosophy deals with the nature of reality? As we have discussed previously, the answer is ontology because it focuses on the nature of reality. Question 2. A researcher who believes that knowledge is derived from observable facts and seeks universal laws is operating under which epistemology? Our answer is positivism because positivism deals with knowledge from observable facts. Question 3. Which paradigm is most aligned with mixed methods research? Our answer is pragmatism because it deals with whatever works. We want you to indicate true or false. Using an interpretivist research paradigm with a quantitative survey design is a coherent alignment. We think this is false because interpretivism aligns with qualitative research methods. Question 5. Ubuntu philosophy, meaning I am because we are, represents which type of philosophical position? Our answer is ontological because it is about the nature of reality. We're presenting skill builder exercise here, and the task is write a one-paragraph philosophical position statement for your thesis or dissertation or current project in your discipline. A takeaway. Articulating your philosophical position in research is the first step to coherent research design. Let me summarize Lecture 2. We are presenting the salient or major points in Lecture 2. We explored the three branches of research philosophy, meaning ontology, epistemology, and axiology. We also examined four research paradigms: positivism, interpretivism, pragmatism, and transformative paradigm. We also stress coherent alignment. Your research paradigm must match your research methodology. In addition, we discuss colonial legacies in research methodology and the importance of the colonial research methodology approaches, especially for the Global South. And finally, we explore the Ubuntu as a relational ontology for different foundations in the Global South. We have provided a quick reference glossary of the core concepts in Lecture 2. And these key concepts include ontology, which we define that it focuses on nature of reality, epistemology, how legitimate knowledge is acquired, axiology, which focuses on values, research paradigm, which is the overall framework for research. We have a coherent alignment of philosophy, paradigm, methodology, and methods. The colonial methodology, which interrogates colonial legacies in research and the use of research methodologies that are appropriate for the Global South and indigenous knowledge. We also have the concept of Ubuntu, which is a relational ontology, emphasizing that I am because we are. What to preview the next lecture, which is Lecture 3. In Lecture 3, we will move from research philosophy to research ethics, the principles that guide responsible research. We implore you to stay curious, stay methodologically rigorous and elastic, and stay contextually relevant. Let's continue the research journey. Thank you.